Hey everybody, this is Sheets, and I'm going to be going over the MMA card for this Saturday, August 21st. It's a wild card from a GPP perspective. There, in my opinion, at least, a lot of live underdogs and not any really tremendous favorites that you just have to have. So it is a GPP type slate, and I do feel as though, despite it being, I guess, relatively small amount of fights, that you can win this by yourself. So I guess we'll just get right into it. I'll just give you one disclaimer. I'm actually going to probably be away during the time where they would announce that fights came off the card. So I am operating under the assumption, at least now, that all these fights go. So we're going to start with the first fight, because this is kind of a key fight here. You have Ibrahimaj and Palatnikov, and the inside the distance prop is kind of okay, but the pricing is such that, you know, one of these guys really could end up in the optimal, considering how the fight could go. So you have Ibrahimaj with a lot of wrestling and grappling upside. The one bit of news which is kind of out there is that despite that wrestling upside and grappling upside, he didn't bring any of that in his last fight when he fought Max Griffin. He ended up getting brutally beaten. I think his ear was almost torn off. So I don't know whether that impacted this or whatever, but if he brings the style that fits him, he should have a really, really good performance, and he's going to score really well at a really good price. So he is really a key play. I was very surprised when I did an ownership run. I thought he was going to be the most popular fighter on the slate, or at least one of them, and he's just barely one of the top 5 or 6 owned. So if you're hand building or whatever, I'm starting with him. I think he's a really, really, really good play. Palatnikov is good as well in GPPs. So if you are going to play a bunch of lineups, I would certainly get some of him. But I think Ibrahimaj is a really, really strong play. Roberts, Bahamojes or whatever, pretty poor inside the distance prop. Roberts could have some grappling upside, maybe some finish upside. And the pricing is okay. I mean, you can get him at 8,400, which makes some sense. So I would include him in my GPP pool, but I'm not going to make him a priority and saying single max or three max. Bahamondes could be an interesting kind of low owned pivot. Like, I have him projected only 14%. So for me, I mean, again, it is a GPP type of slate, and I know I'm going to come out sounding like I'm recommending a whole bunch of fighters, but in this particular slate, you do want to kind of spread out a little bit. I mean, a lot of things could happen. So Roberts, Bahamondes, I do think both of them are in play. I'm not going to prioritize either of them. So if we're keeping track of who my priorities are, we're going to put Ibrahimaj in here. So Knight Sherman, really interesting situation here, because he's the highest priced fighter on the slate, and the inside the distance prop is okay. It's not like great though, you know. It rates to finish. It doesn't rate to finish in the first round. Even over 2.5 rounds is only like -160 or -150, but for 9,400, that's really asking for trouble, you know? So I don't know how great of a play William Knight might be. Fabio Sherman at 6,800. I mean, it's not the worst punt play in the world, you know? And again, so if you're playing GPPs, I'd probably be inclined to fade William Knight. And if anything, I would include Fabio Sherman in certainly the mix, if that makes any sense. So again, with respect to priorities or anything like that, I don't think either of these fighters is a priority. But, you know, if you come across builds where you don't play William Knight, I think it's totally okay. And if you do come across builds where you need somebody really super cheap, I don't have any problem with Fabio Sherman's side. All right, so Kelliher Pilarte is pretty decent inside the distance prop. And see, it's similar to that of the night play, except here you have Kelliher at only what's his price? 8,800, something like that. Where's Kelliher? No, he's 9,000. So it's a little, he's a little bit better of a value, I think, relative to his inside the distance prop than Knight, given his price. Now Kelliher is no lock or anything like that, but I think he's so far at least the best play that we've gone over. So Kelliher Pilarte, again, not a lock or anything like that. Inside the distance prop is not so unfadable, but I do like it. Saldano Lingo. I originally was going to say that, I think either of these guys could break the slate. It's a pretty poor inside the distance prop. Actually, it's not poor. I mean, it does favor to go to to not go to a decision by a little bit, but the pricing makes it pretty enticing. You have both guys about 8,300, 8,300, 7,900. So if you do want to play either of these guys, I think it's okay in GPPs. But once again, I don't think that either of these guys is a priority. So if we're kind of building this kind of priority list, I would say Brahimaj and Kelliher would be the top two, at least for now. All right, so here is where I think the value is in this next fight. So Trevin Jones, poor Trevin Jones, he seems as though every one of his fights gets canceled. And in this particular situation, he was slated to fight somebody else. I forgot who his name was, but anyway, that guy had to drop out. And they thought they weren't going to get him a fight, and they got him this guy from Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. And when the fight was first announced, Trevin Jones came off like a 3-1 favorite. So they priced these guys. And apparently this guy is pretty good at he's fighting, because the price came all the way down to say $1.50. And they priced him on DraftKings like he was almost a 2.5 to 1 favorite. So Sakaramanov turns out to be a pretty damn good value play. So I actually would say that if I had to prioritize, I think he's an extremely strong value play. Now, again, you have all that other stuff which you would think is factored into the projections and the odds that, he's taking it on short notice and things like that. But you could say, on the other hand, that Trevin Jones has been freaking doing nothing but training for all these fights. And at some point, he's got, it must wear on you, no? I mean, it's like training all day and never getting a chance to play. So I don't know. I do think that Sakaramanov rates to be a very, very strong value play just from the win equity. And with respect to his inside the distance prop, sorry, I have to reshare. Sorry about that. With respect to his inside the distance prop, it's let's take a look at it. And it's not bad. Fight doesn't go to a decision, -190. I mean, he's got to be part of that. I mean, I think this is an extremely strong play. Now, again, obviously, I do want to include Trevin Jones in my player pool for GPPs, but I think that if I had to establish a priority here, I think this replacement guy is an extremely strong play. I don't know. That's at least what the numbers tell me. Okay, let's move on up the card here. Michelle Hubbard, good pricing, but I see very little upside with the inside the distance prop or anything like that. I don't see extreme amount of grappling upside for either one. I mean, I guess Michelle would be okay, but this fight's the closest thing I have to a pass. All right, so Pantoja Royval. This is an extremely live fight, especially for the underdog here. The inside the distance prop, it rates $1.40 pretty much to not go the distance, and you know, I think this is a fight that you probably want to, I don't want to say you have to get a piece of, but I wouldn't be upset. Let's see if you got a lot of this. And Royval, I think, is almost a priority with respect to underdogs here. He brings a lot of pace. He brings a lot of pressure. And if he wins, I mean, he could actually score really well also. So I like him a decent amount. As far as underdogs go, I still think Sakharonov is probably and Brahimaj are better. But Royval, I think, is very, very live here. So if I were playing like, you know, single max, three max, something like that, and I needed an underdog, I would have no problem getting to Royval in this spot. So here's a really key fight as we get up to the last three. So Porter Sherman, yeah, I call it endearingly, you get the fat guys, right? You get the big heavyweights that all have a lot of finishing upside. And you'll see that, you know, that reflected in the odds. It's 200 to go, not to go to decision. In addition to that, both these guys do kind of strike a lot. Like you might actually get some good volume out of these guys too. One thing I will say, and again, this is not, I don't want to say narrative driven or anything like that, but one thing I saw with respect to, you know, substantive, substantive analysis is Parker Porter was extremely overweight for a long time, and apparently he's looking much better. So it's not just a walkover for as far as Chase Sherman goes. I would include a couple of lineups with Porter, but I would say that Chase Sherman probably is a pretty decent key, you know, a pretty decent priority here. So between Sherman and Kelliher, I guess honestly, if I had to pick one, I think I would say Sherman. Boy, how's that for a lot of confidence? Yeah, so I'm looking at those two as probably the two main ones. I like those two more than William Knight, if that helps you at all. Next fight, Madsen Guida. So Madsen is yes, he is a Olympic wrestling, I think a gold medalist in Greco-Roman wrestling. So yes, he does have a lot of takedown upside, but he's not really a submission guy. He's not a ground and pound guy. I just don't know if 9,100 is going to be a price that he could pay off unless he gets just a whole bunch of takedowns, which is possible. But Clay Guida has been around. I was expecting, now just to kind of talk through my process, I was expecting though Madsen to be a lot more popular than he is. Like when you see a guy with like all that wrestling, they usually they usually have a lot of guys own him, but he's not really rating to be that high owned, and because he's not projecting that well. Because again, he just has the wrestling, he doesn't have too much. I'm gonna include him in my keys. Like I'm gonna really try to make this decision between these three guys, between Madsen, Sherman, and Kelliher. I would prefer to not take Knight. I would actually rather play Madsen than Knight. Or maybe that's stupid. Knight is just so much better than his opponent. That's the problem, is that Knight could probably take down his opponent just as easily as Madsen could take down his. So I don't know, but I definitely think Madsen is actually more in play than ownerships would indicate. And then, and again, I will play some Clay Guida in GPPs, but again, not a priority. The main event, once again, just because of the way the algorithm prices these things, they should price the main event higher because of the 5 rounds. The 5 rounds just produces that big of a floor in case the fight doesn't finish. It just allows you to just rack up just so many more significant strikes over the course of 5 rounds that it just makes it almost always a really, really strong play. Now, again, if in fact you do have a slate where a whole bunch of like really, really strong plays emerge with a lot of upside and first round KO upside, then I would say you could try to fade the main event. But this slate is not really like that. On the other hand, this main event is not exactly the greatest main event with respect to DraftKings scores I've seen. So with respect to who I like, I do think Gastelum is in play, 7,500. I think he's another really, really strong long shot. So between him, Royval, who's the other 7,500? I had him up here for a while. Was it Lingo? Royval. Did I say him? Even Parker Porter, but Royval is a very strong underdog. Who else was the strong underdog? You'll look back, you'll see. There's actually one fight I haven't gotten into yet. I apologize. We'll get to that in a second. But I do like both sides of the main event. I'm going to have some Cannonier. I'm going to have some Gastelum. I probably will have at least one of them in my main lineup just because. The one fight that we didn't get to, again, I'm sorry that I missed it, was the was Nunez against Balicki. And it is actually a fight that's going to gather a lot of ownership. So I don't know why it's not in this sheet here. Oh, there it is. I just missed it. Okay, so this fight does not have some great props, but Bea Malicki's got a lot of size. She could rate to get a lot of control time, and I think she's in play. She's getting a lot more ownership than I first was expecting. So when it comes to a situation like this where the inside the distance prop is not that great, and the finishing upside's not that great, she's not really much of a grappler to mass upside that way, I might end up going underweight on this one. It certainly is not going to be a priority. So again, to summarize, my key fighters are probably going to be Rajimov and the replacement guy. That was the other underdog, the Kakramanov. And those 9,100 and up guys, I do like them all, but I think Kelliher and Sherman are probably slightly best, and then Madsen, and then Knight. It is going to be a wild one. I really would expect the unexpected. I would play a bunch of GPP lineups if you had the bankroll to do it, because you could get a unique lineup to and grab it home and take it home. All right, that's all I got for you guys. Good luck on the slate, and I'll catch you next week.